My name is not important. The studio I worked for isn't important. What is important is the truth. And the truth is a sound you can't unhear. It's not a scream. It's not a whisper. It's the low, resonant hum of absolute, soul-crushing terror. It's the sound I heard every night for 3 months in the summer of 2001, coming from the bedroom of the most famous man on the planet. Everyone has a theory about Michael Jackson. The surgeries, the Neverland Ranch, the sleepovers. They're all just symptoms. They're the leaves and the branches, but no one has ever seen the root. The dark, twisted, gnarled thing growing in the dark beneath the surface. I saw it. I was hired to document a genius at work. Instead, I became a witness to a haunting. And I'm not talking about ghosts. I'm talking about the thing that was haunting him. This isn't a story about what you think you know. This is a story about why Michael Jackson couldn't sleep. And after you hear it, you might not be able to either. My job was audio archivist and field recordist. It sounds fancier than it was. Mostly I worked for a post-production house in Burbank, a place that smelled perpetually of stale coffee and ozone from overheating gear. My life was a cycle of DAT tapes, time code, and the gentle hiss of a Nagra recorder. I was good at capturing the world, of finding the perfect, crisp audio in any environment. I was a ghost, a pair of ears. That's why I got the call. It was for a project tentatively titled Michael Jackson, The Private Sessions. The concept was intimate, raw. Just Michael in his home studio at Neverland workshopping tracks for what would eventually become Invincible. No cameras, just audio. The idea was to capture the unfiltered creative process, the whispers of genius before it was polished for the masses. My job was to be there, to set up the mics, to ensure every breath, every tap of a finger on a piano key, every frustrated sigh was preserved, for posterity, for history. I was, of course, terrified. This was Michael Jackson, the king of pop, a figure so mythologized he felt less like a person and more like a celestial event. The first day driving up to the gates of Neverland Valley Ranch was like entering a waking dream. The manicured perfection, the eerie quiet, the sense of being in a world entirely constructed by one man's imagination. It was beautiful and unsettling in equal measure. When I met him, he was small, fragile. He moved with a dancer's grace, but it was muted, like a slowed-down recording of himself. His handshake was soft, almost hesitant. His voice was that famous whisper, but up close, it had a raspy, papery quality to it. "Thank you for coming," he'd said. "The sound, it has to be perfect, it has to be true." We set up in his studio, a technological marvel tucked away behind the main house. The first few sessions were magical. He'd arrive around 10 p.m., often in his pajamas, and he'd work until dawn. He'd get lost in the music, building harmonies out of thin air, layering beatbox rhythms and vocal percussion into a tapestry of sound that was breathtaking. I was just the guy in the corner watching the levels, ensuring the reels were spinning. He'd sometimes forget I was there, and those were the best moments. That's when the real magic happened. But I started to notice things. The deep, violet bruises under his eyes, visible even through his makeup. The way his hands would sometimes tremble when he reached for a glass of water. The medical kit one of his assistants always had nearby wasn't just for show. It was full of vials, small brown bottles with long clinical names. But it wasn't the pills that caught my attention. It was the other things. The first incident was easy to dismiss. It was 2 a.m. Michael was hunched over the mixing board, utterly absorbed. The only sound was the gentle whir of the tape machines and his own humming. Then a sound bled into my headphones, a low-frequency hum, so deep it was almost a vibration more than a noise. It was like the idling engine of a massive truck, but wrong. It had a dissonance to it, a harmonic that grated on the inner ear. I ripped the headphones off, thinking it was a fault in the line, a ground loop issue. "You hear it too?" Michael's voice was thin, strained. I looked up. He was staring at me, his eyes wide. He looked like a child who'd heard a monster in the closet. I think it's just a faulty cable, Mr. Jackson," I said, my voice sounding too loud, in the sudden silence. "I'll run a diagnostic." He just shook his head slowly, a movement full of a weary, practiced dread. "No, you can't fix it, it's just passing by." He went back to work as if nothing had happened. The hum faded after a few minutes. I checked every piece of equipment. Everything was pristine. I wrote it off as fatigue. The next time, it was a week later. We were taking a break. Michael was sipping ginger tea, staring out the soundproofed window into the pitch-black Neverland night. He spoke without looking at me. "Do you ever get the feeling that the sky is just paper?" he whispered. "That it's all painted on, and sometimes something on the other side scratches at it?" I didn't know what to say. I mumbled something about it being a long night. He turned to me, and his expression was one of profound, existential loneliness. "They scratch at the sky, and sometimes they get through. That's where the music comes from. You have to be careful what you let in." I assumed it was a metaphor, poetic license, the strange ramblings of genius. But the incidents kept escalating. He started insisting on a specific microphone for his vocals, an old hulking Neumann U-47. Not because it sounded better, but because, as he told his head of security in a conversation I overheard, the silver in the grill that keeps the whispers out. The security guy, a grim-faced man named Carl, just nodded solemnly and made sure the mic was always there. Then came the sleepwalking. I was working late, cataloging the day's tapes, when I saw him. He was gliding through the main hall of the house, his eyes wide open but completely vacant. He was moving with that unnatural, graceful glide, but his arms were held stiffly at his sides. He was humming. But it wasn't a song I knew. It was a series of atonal, microtonal notes that made the hair on my arms stand up. It was the audio, equivalent of static from a dead channel, but structured, intentional. He walked right past me, through a door leading to the grounds, and stood in the middle of a manicured lawn, staring straight up at the moon. He stood there, perfectly still, for 20 minutes. Humming that awful broken melody. Carl found him and gently led him back inside, as if this were a nightly ritual. The final straw, the moment my professional curiosity curdled into genuine fear, was the night we recorded the vocal track for Speechless. He was giving the performance of a lifetime, voice cracking with raw, vulnerable emotion. And on the second chorus, as he held a long, beautiful note, it happened again. That hum, but this time it wasn't in my headphones, it was in the room. It vibrated through the floor, up through the legs of my chair. The glass of water on the console trembled, producing tiny concentric rings. Michael's voice hitched. He stopped singing. His face went ashen. He looked toward the corner of the studio, the darkest part of the room, where the light from the console didn't reach. "No," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Not now. Please. I'm working." The hum intensified. It wasn't loud, it was deep. It felt like it was resonating inside my bones, my teeth. It was a sound of immense pressure and age. And then, for a fraction of a second, I saw it. Or I think I did. In the dark corner, the shadows seemed to coalesce. They didn't form a shape, not really. It was more like a sudden, profound depth, a hole punched through reality into somewhere else. And from that darkness I heard a new sound underneath the hum, a dry, rustling sound, like countless insect legs skittering over stone. It lasted for 10 seconds. Then, it was gone. The room was silent. The glass of water was still. Michael Jackson, the king of pop, slid down the wall onto the floor, drew his knees to his chest, and began to cry. Not a dramatic sob, but a quiet, hopeless, utterly broken weeping. The sound of a man who had run out of places to hide. I didn't know what to do. I just sat there, my heart hammering against my ribs, the smell of ozone and something else, something metallic and sharp, like the air after a lightning strike, filling my nostrils. Carl and a nurse came in. They didn't seem surprised. They helped him to his feet and led him away. As he passed me, Michael looked at me. The vacancy was gone, replaced by a terrifying clarity. "They don't like the music," he said, his voice raw. "They think it's a door, and I keep opening it." The official sessions were put on indefinite hiatus, but I was kept on retainer. My new, unspoken job was to stay at the ranch, in a guest suite, on 24-hour call. I think they were afraid of what I might say if I left. Or maybe, and this is a thought that came later, they needed another pair of ears. A canary in the coal mine. The next 2 weeks were a slow descent into hell. The nocturnal hum became a fixture. It would start around 3 a.m. every night, a sonic predator marking its territory. Michael stopped coming to the studio altogether. He stayed in his bedroom on the second floor. I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake listening to that sound permeate the house. It was different up there. It had textures. Sometimes it was a low hum. Other times it was a series of rapid sub-bass pulses like a heartbeat from a creature the size of a mountain. I started having nightmares. Visions of vast, lightless spaces and things moving in the dark. Things that had never known shape or form until they heard a human voice and tried to mimic it. One night the pulsing was worse than ever. It was a relentless, rhythmic thrum-thrum-thrum that made my molars ache. I heard a commotion upstairs, muffled voices, a sound of panic. My professional instinct to document, to record, overrode my terror. I grabbed my portable DAT recorder and a shotgun mic, and I crept upstairs. The door to Michael's suite was ajar. Carl and the nurse were there looking helpless. And in the center of the massive round bed was Michael. He was thrashing, not like a man having a nightmare, but like a man fighting an invisible assailant. His eyes were rolled back in his head, showing the whites. "He won't take the sedative," the nurse hissed. "He says it makes the door easier to open." And then Michael spoke. But it wasn't his voice. It was a chorus of voices, layered and distorted, speaking in perfect, chilling unison. It was his voice, a woman's voice, a child's voice, and underneath it all, that same, dry, skittering rustle. "The skin is paper, the bone is the frequency, we want the song, we want the shape." The hum in the room intensified. The windows vibrated in their frames. I saw it then in the corner of his bedroom. The darkness was alive. It was swirling, condensing, and from it, thin tendril-like shadows were stretching out across the room, reaching for the bed. They weren't solid. They were made of the same impossible darkness, a blackness that seemed to drink the light from the room. I acted without thinking. I raised the shotgun mic, not to record, but like a weapon. I pointed it at the corner and I hit record. The red light glowed. The effect was instantaneous and horrific. The hum shot up in pitch into a shriek of distorted feedback that only I seemed to hear. The tendrils of darkness recoiled as if struck. The thing in the corner writhed, and for a single soul-shattering second I saw it. I saw a glimpse of what was on the other side. It wasn't a monster. It was an absence. A hungry, sentient void that had become aware of the beautiful, structured noise of a human soul and wanted to consume it, to wear it like a skin. Michael's music wasn't just a door. It was a beacon. A flare shot into the silent, screaming dark of whatever dimension this thing inhabited, and it had come calling. Michael screamed, a raw, primal sound of terror. And then he fell silent, collapsing back onto the bed. The room went quiet. The normal, mundane sounds of the night returned. The darkness in the corner was just darkness. Carl was staring at me, his face a mask of shock and something else, recognition. He knew. He'd always known. The thing on the bed that was Michael Jackson stirred. He looked at me, his eyes clear but filled with a bottomless terror. He pointed a trembling finger at my recorder. "They know your frequency now," he whispered before passing out cold. I was escorted off the property that night. They paid me a staggering amount of money, multiples of my contract, with a non-disclosure agreement that would have buried me and my entire family under litigation for 100 years. They took the DAT tape. Carl's final words to me were, delivered without emotion, a flat, practiced statement. "You were never here. What you saw was a sleep disorder, a parasomnia. You recorded nothing. You heard nothing." I tried to go back to my old life, but you can't unhear that sound. You can't unsee that void. The hum followed me, not in the air, but in my head. A psychic tinnitus. I'd hear it in the quiet moments, a constant, low-level reminder that the universe is not what we think it is. That there are things in the cracks and they are listening. I became obsessed. I started researching high-frequency infrasound, auditory phenomena. I looked at every strange interview, every bizarre anecdote about Michael Jackson with new eyes. The, hyperbaric chamber. Not for longevity. A desperate attempt to create a pressurized seal, a soundproof room. The oxygen masks? Perhaps a way to alter his breathing, to change the very frequency of his own body to make it harder for them to find him. The plastic surgeries? A futile attempt to change the vessel, to shed the skin that they seemed so interested in. He was building a fortress. Neverland wasn't a playground. It was a bunker. And it wasn't enough. When he died, the official story was propofol. Anesthetic to finally grant him the sleep he couldn't find on his own. I don't believe that. Not entirely. I think he finally made a deal. I think he stopped fighting. The constant terror, the endless siege on his mind. He just let them in. The ultimate quietus. I still work in audio. But I can't master a track without listening for that dissonant harmonic hidden in the mix. I can't walk into a silent room without feeling a cold dread. I hear that hum in the drone of a distant airplane, in the idle of a city bus, in the deep notes of a pipe organ. It's everywhere. Once you know how to listen for it, you realize it's always been there. A background radiation of dread. So, why couldn't Michael Jackson sleep? Because something was calling to him. Something from a place without light, without form, without music. And it loved his voice. It wanted to wear it. And it was scratching at the door every single night of his life, trying to get in. Look at his later performances. Look at the pain in his eyes, the sheer exhaustion. That isn't the face of a man who is tired. It's the face of a man who is being slowly, inexorably consumed. This is my call to action for you. Listen. Just listen. in the quiet of your own home late at night when the world is asleep. Do you hear it? A low hum, just at the edge of your hearing? Don't try to find its source. Don't hum along, just pray it doesn't start to recognize your frequency. Pray it doesn't start to scratch back.